Hi, good morning from New York City. I think it's the evening and it's already evening in the Philippines, but I'm Beko Pin. I'm in New York City covering the working visit of Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Today will be day three of his working visit in the US. Today is also the United Nations General Assembly. He will be speaking in a few hours during the high-level general debates. In fact, pumasok na siya kanina mga an hour or two ago, pumasok na yung mga world leaders and their representatives kasi hindi naman lahat ng heads of state mismo yung magsalita during the high-level general debates. Pero pumasok na si President Marcos and other world leaders who are expected to speak or will be speaking during the general debates. So, yung order mamaya, he will be second to speak during the afternoon session. Yung afternoon session magsisimula ng alas 3 ng hapon, New York time. That will be around 3 a.m. in the Philippines. So baka nagtaka kayo bakit alas 3 pa. Yung morning session ay 9 to 3 p.m. And then sa hapon naman ay 3 hanggang 9 p.m. Pero until sawa yan. We'll be talking about it a little bit more siguro later or later tonight, New York time. But the next day, early morning pala in the Philippines with Sofia Toma Cruz, who covers foreign affairs for Rappler. Because although world leaders are given a courtesy of 15 minutes, kung lumagpas sila sa 15 minutes nila, pwede naman sila magpatuloy at hindi sila ika-cut off ng United Nations, of course. So, again, it's day three of President Marcos's working visit. Although the Philippine media delegation, we've been here for 4 days because we flew in one day ahead of the president. So I'll walk you through what has happened so far in the first 2 full days of President Marcos's visit to the United States. Pero siguro to give you an idea of what it's like in New York City right now. Syempre, because nga it's a napaka-intense na napakalaking hub ng activity, financial, tourist destination ng New York. Parati naman talagang traffic dito, pero lalo na ngayon dahil nga napakaraming world leaders ang nagsiliparan dito, of course including their delegations and their staff, not counting of course the media who are here. I was talking to not really tourists, people who are working in connection to the UNJ, and they were saying it's so hard to book hotels nowadays. The prices are crazy. Kasi nga everyone is converging in New York for the UNGA or the UNGA. While I was walking from the hotel to here right behind me is the Rockefeller Center. I was hearing locals saying na the UN is in town. So, in fact, habang patawid ng kalsada, hindi strange na hinaharang yung traffic ng panandalian kasi nga may mga world heads of state or important or mga VIPs. Kasi hindi lang naman heads of state yung nagko-converge dito ngayon para sa UNGA. So yun yung nangyayari ngayon dito sa New York City. But of course, life goes on kasi meron mang UNGA, marami ding ibang bagay na mga nangyayari ngayon sa New York City. So, day one of President Marcos's working visit to the US, today is the 20th. He arrived here on the 18th around noon, right before noon, at Newark Airport. Hindi siya sa JFK lumapag. Newark is in New Jersey. That's one state away, pero malapit lang din yun. Just right after, a few hours after he landed, along with his delegation, he attended a gathering of the Filipino community in New Jersey as a New Jersey Performing Arts Center. Habang papasok kami doon actually, nagsimula yung protest. May ilang Filipino or meron ding hindi Filipino, mga sympathetic to the cause of the Filipinos who were protesting there, protesting the arrival of President Marcos in the US. Of course, yung bitbit niya dito, or yung bitbit niya naman parati na legacy, siya ay anak ni Ferdinand, the first Ferdinand Marcos to be president of the Philippines, the late dictator who was ousted from power in 1986. So we'll talk about that a little more later. Pero yun nga, yung Filipino community gathering sa New Jersey, bagamat nasa New Jersey siya, yung mga dumalo, the Filipinos who attended the event, were not just from New Jersey or not even just from the tri-state area, so New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, pero meron ding dumalo all the way from the West Coast, sa kabilang side ng United States. We talk about Los Angeles, yan, syempre ang laki ng Filipino community doon. So may mga supporters na dumalo all the way from the West Coast, meron ding tumawid all the way from Canada. Siguro tansyain natin 1/3 or a little less than 1/3 ng crowd ay galing pa Canada, lumipad dito noong 18 para dumalo dun sa Filipino community event. Um, sa Filipino community event, normally, yun talaga yung first event ni President Marcos when he flies into another foreign country. I'm basing that on the fact na in Singapore and Indonesia, his first state visits, yung una niyang event parati, paglapag a few hours after he attends a Filipino community gathering. So he graces that. So let's talk about, it was during the Filipino community event na nakita natin yung initial delegation. Hindi pa natin alam yung full delegation kasi alam lang natin so far yung delegation ng public officials, yung government officials, and yung family din ni President Marcos. Pero hindi pa natin alam yung full list ng private sector or yung business leaders na kasama niya or lumipad rin papunta dito para sa UNGA. Hindi pala sa UNGA, pero para sa side meetings on the sidelines of the UNGA. Ano ba tong side meetings na to? Siyempre, because he's flying in to the US all the way from Manila, that's a 16-hour flight kung direct flight, more or less. Kung may connecting flight ka, halos 24 hours na biyahe yun. It makes sense na, kumbaga, you make the most out of your visit. And aside from the mismong general debates before the UNGA, you will hold mga side meetings. Sometimes they're bilateral meetings, meaning meetings with fellow heads of state. And you also have business meetings, and that's where the business leaders come in. So yung delegation niya for the US, let me double check the list. Of course, with him is First Lady Luisa Renata Marcos, his wife. Also with him here, although based sila dito, syempre, is Ambassador Jose Manuel Babe Romualdez. He is the Philippine Ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Antonio Manuel R. Lagdameo Sr. He is also the Permanent Ambassador to the UN. Also here is House Speaker Ferdinand Martin Romualdez, who is the cousin of the President. Also here is his eldest son, Representative Ferdinand Alexander A. Marcos III. Interestingly enough, the two are House leaders, obviously. House Speaker, yung isa yung si Sandro Marcos naman, who is the first-time legislator, is the senior deputy majority leader. They're both here just as the House of Representatives begins tackling the 2023 budget during plenary. Also here is Joseph Simon A. Marcos. He is the second child of the president. May nakita natin ng social media. Kasama din dito yung bunsong anak ni President Marcos at ni First Lady Lisa Marcos, si Benny, yung bunsong kumampanya para sa kanya ng 2022 election. So the whole family is actually here in New York right now. Among the government officials, you have DFA Secretary Enrique Manalo, DOF's Benjamin Jokno, DBM Secretary Amena Pangandaman, NEDA Secretary Arce Balisacan, BSP Governor Felipe Medalla is also here. DOT Secretary Cristina Frasco is here. We also have the head of the DOTR, the head of the DICT. The Department of Migrant Workers Secretary Tuts Ople is also part of the delegation. So is DTI Secretary Alfredo Pascual. PMS Chief Naida Angpin is also with the President. So is SAP Antonio Lagdameo Jr. He is the son of Ambassador Lagdameo. And of course, Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles is also part of the delegation. So no first day ng President, after the Filipino community event, apparently he went and to an Eric Clapton concert here in New York City, although we didn't see that kasi hindi naman lahat ng times kasama ng Pangulo ang media delegation who flew in from Manila to New York. If you notice, the bulk of his team, of his entourage, of his delegation are members of the economic team. Kasi like in Singapore and Indonesia, yung pinaka-focus or yung pinaka-goal of this trip is hopefully to bring in investments to the Philippines. And I think yun yung naging emphasis on day 2 of his visit. That was yesterday in terms of our time zone, September 19. So yung una niyang event, or at least yung one of his first the first event before his first public event was a luncheon with the USPH Society. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But before that, he did have meetings with Boeing, Waste Fuel, and New Scale. Yung new scale that has to do with nuclear energy, wala pang detalye from the Office of the President kung ano bang pinag-usapan. Wala pang detalye rin about waste fuel and about Boeing. Although the notable people who were part of these meetings, based on releases by the Office of the President and the Office of the Press Secretary, we saw nakasama sa Boeing meeting si Ramon Ang of San Miguel, and also in all three meetings, I believe, or at least in the tail end of the meetings, kasama doon si Speaker Romualdez at si Representative Sandro Marcos sa meetings with the president. And then after that, at around at around 3 p.m., he headed to the New York Stock Exchange, um, where he had an economic forum at the New York Stock Exchange itself. Because later on, no 4 p.m., so 3 p.m. yung parang economic forum. Then at 4 p.m., he rang the closing bell for the day at the floor ng stock exchange. No? So yung highlights of that economic forum, yung nag-greet sa kanya, yung vice chairman ng New York Stock Exchange, si John Tuttle. He is also a president of the New York Stock Exchange Foundation. So yung emphasis doon, syempre, kasi nga stock exchange yung venue or yung event na iyon ay yung Philippine-US business relations. Let me draw from notes, and you can actually check the Rappler live updates page for dispatches from the New York Stock Exchange kahapon. So kahapon, when he was there, parang he really doubled down on the importance of Filipino-US relations, not just in the economy, but also in geopolitics. So nabanggit ko kanina na one of his first public events, one of his the event that preceded his first public event yesterday was a luncheon with the US Philippine Society. Because during that discussion daw, he was at a fireside chat. Ano ba yung fireside chat pa yun? By definition, it's supposed to be a casual chit-chat. Pero kumbaga yung labas, parang nag-Q&A sila ni John Tuttle after their opening statements, or after the opening statement of John Tuttle, followed by Sabina Boitis, the CEO of the Boitis Group, who also heads yung parang advisory council of the private sector ni President Marcos, and finally President Marcos spoke, and after that was a short Q&A between the president and John Tuttle. So sabi niya sa fireside chat na yon, in-emphasize niya yung importance ng Philippine-US business relations. Sabi niya, when we are in crisis, we look to the United States, and I have to say that the United States has not failed us. If we are able to show some immediate success in this partnership, that will galvanize our young people to continue to work in that direction. Sabi rin ni President Marcos, he cannot see the Philippines in the future without having the United States as a partner. Yung context, the original context nun, he was speaking to people at the US-Philippine Society luncheon. He was referring specifically to geopolitics, pero sabi niya, yung sentiment na yun, he cannot imagine a Philippine future without the United States. He said it also applies to stocks of the economy. So that's also very telling of what direction President Marcos wants the Philippines to head under his presidency. Sabi niya rin, I cannot overstate the role the US has played in every aspect of our lives. And then it was followed by him ceremonially ringing yung closing bell ng New York Stock Exchange. It closed at 4 p.m. So 4 p.m. pumindot siya nung button, tapos nag-bell, and then he gavelled, and then nag-close na yung markets for the day. With him sa balcony, when he rang the closing bell, was Speaker Romualdez, DTI Chief Alfred Pascual, of course, First Lady Lisa Araneta Marcos. He also was joined by his son, Representative Sandra Marcos, and Finance Chief Benjamin Jokno, and of course Sabina Boitis, who again heads the private sector advisory council for the president. Speaking of the private sector, yung kasama niya dito, or at least what we know so far based on the release from Mr. Aboitis, so sa kanya hindi galing sa palasyo to, andito daw, or at least may representatives, because we haven't seen all of them in person yet. Manuel D. Pangilinan, of course, of the MVP group. We haven't seen him personally, but we did see associates of MVP here in New York. We did see in person Ramon Ang of the San Miguel group, of course. Jaime Isabel de Ayala, we have yet to see him, but We know for a fact that he flew into New York a few days ago. Halos kasabay ng media delegation. Also there at the New York Stock Exchange was JG Summit's Lance Gokong Wei. Also here, although we did not see her, was Magsaysay Group's Doris Ho, and also SM Prime's Hans Go. So bali ito yung top executives, top CEOs, top businessmen from the Philippines are also here in New York, joining President Marcos in his working visit. So today, yung main agenda is really the address before the UNGAs during the general debate that happens around expected 3:15 kasi nga 15 minutes yung courtesy um, yung allocated per world leader or per representative. Although if they go over time, again, they won't be stopped. They can continue and continue. If they want to speak for hours, they theoretically can. Hopefully they won't para naman hindi tayo mag-delay ng sobra-sobra. Pero for updates pala sa UNGA, we do have a live updates page. You can check that out for updates that go beyond the president and all the other world leaders who will be speaking today. My colleague Sofia Toma Cruz has written an excellent curtain raiser about the UNGA, about the topics that we expect them to, or the topics that we expect the world leaders to discuss later as they speak one by one. Trivia, although siguro nag-start na kanina, yung unang nagsasalita parate sa UNGA general debates is Brazil. That's a tradition that goes back decades. Second is the United States because they are the host country because yung UN ay nasa New York. So yun yung tradition. And then after that, it's determined na siya depending on parang a lot of things are being considered in picking who speaks next or who comes first. Geographic location, yung context ng isang bansa. So there, and then later on we'll find out the seating arrangement of the world leaders at the UNGA. President Marcos will be sitting behind or close to a very important world leader and a world leader that he actually wants to meet with. Speaking about bilateral meetings, so hindi pa natin alam kung sino yung ini-meet ni President Marcos kasi these things are very fluid. It's hard to tell if a bilateral meeting will actually push through. Kahit na two countries have agreed upon or expressed mutual interest in having a bilateral meeting. Sophia and I discussed this the other day. Parang ultimately, it's very fluid kasi hindi natin alam baka may last minute na mangyari or parang may urgent last minute meeting. So that's why typically these bilateral meetings are announced after the fact. We find out na lang pagkatapos ng meeting na magkita pala si President so-and-so or si Prime Minister so-and-so, and etc. On the sidelines of the UN. Secretary Manalo of the DFA has met with several of his counterparts already ahead of the UNGA. So ibang side meetings naman yun. Iba din yung side meetings led by the President himself. He'll also be meeting with business leaders. May nakalista na. And we will be giving you updates should and assuming those meetings push through because again, things are very fluid in events like the UNGA and the side meetings related to the UNGA because so many things are happening at the same time and sometimes major events that affect several countries happen and so everyone adjusts depending on the need. So that's it from New York so far. Oh, sorry. Talking about the bilateral meetings, President Marcos has said that he expects to or he hopes to meet with US President Joe Biden on the sidelines of the UNGA today. Of course, I would assume everyone would want to have a bilateral meeting with the US. President Joe Biden, of course, has already invited Marcos to visit the US. That will be a different kind of visit altogether. Siyempre, hindi ito, kasi ito working visit lang ito in the context of the UNGA. So if he does fly in to the US, that would be a different visit. It would possibly be a state visit. Although wala pa tayong detalye kung kailan mangyayari yon or matutuloy ba yon in the next quarter or within the year. We don't know yet, but we will find out soon enough. So that's it so far from New York. In a few hours after President Marcos addresses the UN, so it's around, it's 11, no, it's nawawala na ako sa oras. It is currently 10:30 New York time. Magsalita siya past 3. Mga 8 p.m. dito, 9 p.m. dito. So 8, 9, 10 a.m. in the Philippines. Sophia and I will be going online to talk to you to give you a summary of what President Marcos brought up during his address before the UNG, and we'll also be talking about other world leaders and what was discussed so far on the first day of the general debates. Again, this has been Beko Pin. I am in New York covering the president's first working visit and first trip to the United States. Oh, what we didn't discuss, sorry, pahabol na lang bago tayo matapos. Siyempre, yung isa ring dahilan kung bakit big deal or ina-anticipate yung visit na ito ni President Marcos is that he does have a standing contempt uh, judgment by a U.S. court in the Philippines. Sophia already explained this because he is head of state. He enjoys or he is entitled to diplomatic immunity. Yung reasoning doon ay because he represents the interests of the Philippines and the state. That's why he's accorded that um, he gets accorded that it's not so much a privilege, but that respect. Now, while he is the president, while he is the head of state, he won't be in danger of arrest. Hindi naman automatic, by the way. Sophia also explained this, hindi automatic na paglapag niya dito, maaari siyang maaresto. May proseso pa yun, parang isabina muna siya, kung hindi siya sumagot doon, etc. Pero wala yun, dahil nga he is the head of state of the Philippines. Also, New York holds a lot of history. And when we talk about the Marcos name, I discussed this in an article following the Filipino community event. Parang in-emphasize doon na may sentimental value yung New York kay President Marcos and First Lady Marcos. Kasi this is where they met. This is where they met when they were younger. Attorney Araneta Marcos, then only Attorney Araneta, is a lawyer. And then she was here in New York practicing law. They met at a courthouse where Marcos was in because he was attending to cases filed against his mother, the former First Lady Imelda Marcos. That's the context in which they met. Of course, as I wrote in the story, also discusses over the fact na may kaso, kinasuhan yung mga Marcoses in the United States over the human rights abuses and the alleged or the pilferage of Philippine coffers during the over 2 decades that Ferdinand Marcos, the older Ferdinand Marcos, was in power. So that also paints you a picture of the context and the importance of his visit here in the United States. Also in New York, spending spree once upon a time dito si Imelda Marcos, bought buildings, expensive apartments, went shopping in luxury stores. So that's a context that I think also is important to note when you're talking about President Marcos visiting the United States for the first time as the Philippine head of state. And that's it on my part from New York. Again, we'll be seeing you in a few hours. That this time I'll be joined by Sophia Tomaklis by then, and we will discuss the address of President Marcos before the UNGA or the UNGA. Again, this has been the Ecopin reporting from New York. I'll see you again, not just tonight or later today, but also in the coming days as we continue to cover the working visit of President Marcos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.